So we are heading towards one of the most important Supreme Court moments for gun rights in many years. Two major cases, a rifle ban and magazine ban, are now heading to Supreme Court conference on February 20th. And these cases will not be alone, and this is why this is so critical. Multiple other rifle and magazine ban challenges are lining up for that same exact conference in the Supreme Court, which means we could be looking at the perfect storm of Second Amendment cases all landing in front of the Supreme Court, landing on their desk at the same time. That is exactly the scenario that many justices have been hinting at and maybe saying that they wanted. So let's break down what is happening in these critical cases and why this could finally force the Supreme Court to answer a very simple but important question, which is essentially, are AR-15s and magazines protected by the Second Amendment? Now, before we jump into this video, if you want to support the channel, one of the best ways to do that is simply to subscribe. You can also click the like button. If you enjoy this content, click the like button because that just tells the YouTube algorithm that you appreciate this type of two-way content and it shares it to more people. I also want to thank one of the main supporters of this channel, which is Attorneys on Retainer. When it comes to self-defense protection, in my opinion, AOR is in a league of their own. They're backed by an actual law firm, the Attorneys for Freedom, and they're always trying to give you as much as possible for your membership, and they're always trying to go above and beyond. Also, right now, they have a convention coming up in just, a week. So I will leave a link to that down below as well if you want to come out to the convention. I will be there along with a bunch of other creators and speakers. So if you want to come and hang out with us during the convention in Arizona, check that out using the links down below. So if you've been following the channel for a while, you will know that the Supreme Court has been avoiding rifle and magazine ban cases for years. The core question, however, that they need to answer is very simple. Does the Second Amendment protect common semi-automatic rifles like AR-15s and then also standard capacity magazines? Now, on this topic, lower courts are deeply divided. Some say that these are in fact protected arms. Others say that they are too militaristic, that they're too useful in military service. And some say that they can be banned even though they are protected arms. And that confusion is exactly what these cases are asking for the Supreme Court to finally fix. Well, now multiple rifle and magazine ban cases are heading to the Supreme Court for a conference on February 20th, including two very important cases that we've been tracking for a while. Now, the two main cases are Vermontes and Duncan. The first key case, Vermontes versus Cook County, is a case that challenges Cook County's ban on so-called assault weapons, which include AR-15s and dozens of other commonly owned rifles. The plaintiffs argue that these rifles are in common use and therefore they're protected under Heller, Bruin, and the Second Amendment. They're asking for the Supreme Court to finally say once and for all that states and counties and cities cannot ban an entire class of commonly owned firearms like AR-15s. Now, the second key case is Duncan versus Bonta, and that deals with California's magazine ban. In this case, it was previously granted, vacated, and remanded after the Supreme Court issued the Bruin ruling, but now once again, it's back in front of the Supreme Court because the lower court continues to uphold rifle bans and magazine bans despite that Bruin framework. Now, here's what is happening in these cases, which is very important. Both Vermontes and Duncan have now been relisted once again, and they were relisted, despite, some other cases being denied. They've survived multiple conferences, and once again, they've been relisted. That means that the Supreme Court justices are actively discussing them behind closed doors, and they're just not outright denying them like we've seen with some of these other two-way cases. And now they have been relisted to go to the Supreme Court conference on February 20th. Now, here's the key point with that specific conference date. They won't be the only Second Amendment cases at that conference which deal with rifle bans and magazine bans. There are multiple other rifle and magazine ban challenges from different states and different circuit courts that are also going to be considered at that same conference. That creates something that we have not seen for a long time, which is multiple cases on the same constitutional question landing together in front of the Supreme Court on the same date. Now, why is this a big deal? Well, this is exactly what many justices have been suggesting that maybe they're waiting for. Instead of taking just one isolated case from one state or one circuit court, the Supreme Court can now look at multiple bans, multiple circuit courts, multiple states, look at a bunch of conflicting rulings all at once, and then issue the same decision if they want. That allows the Supreme Court to resolve the issue nationally instead of just piecemealing this case by case. This also avoids the criticism that maybe, some anti-gun states or some of the opposing counsel have been making about some of these cases, which is, the case that they're looking at is incorrect. It's the wrong vehicle. Maybe there's procedural issues. they can now look at a whole host of cases and say, all of these together, present a critical constitutional question that we need to address. This is now shaping up as a coordinated moment where the Supreme Court can finally answer, are AR-15s protected? Are magazine bans constitutional, and are magazines protected? And can states, cities, and counties just ban outright these common firearms in magazines? Now, when it comes to realists, there are a lot of questions about maybe what does multiple realists mean. Essentially, historically, cases that are relisted at least once have a much higher chance of being granted Supreme Court review. But cases that are relisted many times can go either way. Sometimes multiple relists means that a denial is coming, maybe with something like a dissent, but sometimes it means that the court is lining up cases all together to maybe coordinate a grant and then address that question with multiple cases. That's what makes this moment so important. It may not be that they're just looking at Vermontes and Duncan. Maybe they're looking at all the rifle and magazine ban cases that were sitting in front of them, and they were just trying to coordinate them and get them on the same conference and address them all together. So where does this currently leave us with these rifle bans and magazine ban cases that are in front of the Supreme Court? Well, we now have the Vermontes and Duncan case heading to the February 20th conference, so just next week. And multiple other rifle and magazine ban challenges already are set for that same conference, so they will be considered all together. This creates a perfect storm of cases all focused on the same constitutional question in front of the Supreme Court on the same date. And if the court grants even one of them, or potentially several of these cases together, we may finally get a definitive ruling on rifle bans and magazine bans nationwide that we've been waiting for. So February 20th is the key date to watch for when it comes to the Vermontes and Duncan cases, and also all these other rifle and magazine ban cases. Usually the following week on the order list, we will potentially get an answer on this. At the very least, we hope that they're not denied. But if these cases are granted, we could see briefing begin, in potentially early spring, and then we would probably get a major Second Amendment decision or oral argument before the end of this term. If they are denied, it would signal that the court is still unwilling to step in despite statements from the court that they've made previously from, individuals like Kavanaugh saying that they would address this rifle ban question maybe in a term or two. So that was the promise they made last term when they denied a bunch of rifle ban cases and magazine ban cases. They said that they would address this in a term or two. Well, now this term, they have a whole host of cases lining up together, going to the same conference. So now we will see if they're going to fulfill that promise or if they're going to continue to punt on this issue. So that's where things currently stand right now in the critical rifle and magazine ban cases that are in front of the Supreme Court. Again, conference on February 20th in a whole host of rifle ban and magazine ban cases. And as we get more information, as it develops more, I will let you guys know. If you like this video and you would like to support the channel, one of the best ways to do that is simply to like, comment, and subscribe. All of those things help to fuel the algorithm, just tells the algorithm that you appreciate this type of two-way content and it should share it to more people. But as always, thank you so much for all of your support. And never forget, this nation was built by armed scholars, and this nation will be maintained by armed scholars.